See? As soon as that starts. Again. All right. So good morning. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Good afternoon. We're holding here in the Megillah, Mesechta Megillah, in chapter 6 of the Megillah, or actually the end of chapter 5, right before chapter 6. And we just went through all the 12 different reasons why did Esther invite Achashverosh to a feast and not beg him straight away to save the Jews. Why did Esther also invite Haman to a feast? And why did Esther make a whole scheme? First one feast and then a second feast, and only Haman and no other officials. We had 12 different reasons. And the conclusion was that Rabbi Baravua asked Eliyahu Hanavi which one is true, and he said all 12 of them are correct. Every single part of Torah is correct, is accurate. Now we are up to the part where Haman comes back from the feast. Haman is in grand mood. He's in a very, very Haman says the Gemara. The Megillah explains the verse. And Haman went out by Yoimahu on that day. Sameach b'toiv leiv. He was happy and very cheerful. He thought that I'm almost by the pinnacle of my success, and managed to get a decree out to destroy the Jews. Esther, the queen, is giving me so much personal attention. And then v'chiros Haman es Mordechai b'shar HaMelech. Haman saw Mordechai by the king's gate. He neither rose nor stirred. This was a line that the Frierdiker Rebbe used very commonly in Russia. We say Mordechai lekam v'lezah. Mordechai would not bend his knee, would not move when he saw Haman. Mordechai was not scared of Haman in the least. Even though Haman made a decree against the Jews, Mordechai lekam v'lezah. He was telling the Jews in Russia, not to be scared, even one iota. My grandfather was growing up in the town of Neville. He would always repeat these lines. Mordechai lekam v'lezah. Mashpia in the town would always say these words, not to be scared of the KGB, because Mordechai lekam v'lezah. He didn't even move, was not affected by Haman. So Vayimalei Haman chema. Haman became full of anger. Chema. Vayisapak Haman. Haman wanted to hurt Mordechai, to do something to Mordechai, harm him, but he restrained himself. Vayavei al-Beisai, and he came home. Vayishlach, and he sent. Vayavei es oyhava vezeresh ishtoi. He brought his friends, meaning his group of advisors, and for Zeresh's wife. Vayisaper lehem Haman, and Haman told them, as kvoid ashra, he recounted to them all the glory that he has. V'roiv banav, and this is what the Gemara is going to talk about: his riches and the multitude of his sons. And how the king had promoted Haman and had raised him up higher than all the princes and the king's servants. And Haman said, Esther, Hamalcha, Esther did not bring anybody to the private feast she made to the king. Only me. And tomorrow too as well. Ani karullah imam melech. I am invited to another personal feast with the king. And although this sounds amazing, all this is worth nothing to me. As long as I see Mordechai the Jew sitting by the king's gate, it irks me. It irks his existence. He could be in the top of the world, and still it bothers him. And Zeresh's wife and all of his friends said, Yasu eitz gavoya chamishim amma. Make a gallows 50 cubits, that's between 75 feet and 100 feet high. Uva boiker emar lamelech. In the morning you should tell the king, the Yisluas Mordechai alav, come to the king and say to the king, I would like to hang Mordechai on these gallows. And then he could go joyfully to the banquet tomorrow night with the king. And Haman was very pleased, and he made the gallows. And then, of course, the next verse is where you have to raise your voice to the rest of the Megillah. At that night, the king cannot sleep. And that we'll get to soon. So the Gemara now will discuss what exactly did Haman tell his wife. Haman came home and he told his wife, Kvoid Ashrei, his glory and his riches, V'roiv banav, and the multitude of his sons. What does it mean, the multitude of his sons? Says the Gemara. Vayisaper lahem Haman is quite Asher v'roiv banav. Haman recounted the glory of his riches and the multitude of his sons. V'kama roiv banav. What does it mean, the multitude of his sons? He had many sons. Obviously, it doesn't mean he had only 10 sons, because we see in Tanakh multiple individuals who had many children, more than 10 children. So the Haman should have only 10 sons would not be uniquely described as V'roiv banav, and his many sons. So what does the Megillah mean? That he is bragging, showing off his greatness and his many sons. It can't just be the 10 in the Megillah, especially then people had many wives. So how is he bragging about his many sons? How many sons? V'kama roiv banav. How many sons did Haman have that he's able to brag about his sons? So Amar Rav, says Rav, Lamed. Haman had 30 sons. Where did he get 30 sons from? Asara Shemesu, the Marsha explains, since the pasuk only mentions 10 sons of Haman, which were killed together with him, then a year later it lists off the sons of Haman. You know, in the big letters in the Megillah, the Balkar has to read in one breath. A year later, another 10 sons of Haman were killed. So from here we could learn that there's other sons. It says V'roiv banav, and his many sons, meaning aside for the sons of Haman, which will be mentioned later on in the Megillah, but there will also be other sons, meaning the equivalent amount of sons mentioned each time. So we mentioned the 10 sons of Haman who were hung on the tree together with him, the 10 sons of Haman who were killed a year later and also hung on a tree. And so there must have been another 10 sons, V'roiv banav. So Haman had 30 sons. What happened to these 30 sons? Asara Mesu, 10 of them died in childhood. Asara Nitlu, 10 were hanged in a tree, as recorded in the book of Esther. Asara Mechazrin ala Psachim. And 10 of them would go around and be beggars from door to door. Meaning that they were hungry and they didn't have any food. But Rabbanan Amri, and the rabbis say, so maybe they were not all from Zeresh's wife, maybe from multiple wives. But Rabbanan Amri and the rabbis say, we'll soon see what Rabbi Yonis and Eipshus has to say. Fascinating thing. The Chaim say, which were the students in the Beis Medrash of Rav, that's what the Sifsei Chachamim says, Shemechazerin ala Psachim Shivim. Haman actually had 70 sons who were going around begging for food from door to door. So besides for the 20 that were killed, he had 70 sons, meaning who were poor, he had 90 sons. It does say in the Medrash, Mibnei banav shel Haman, lamdu Torah bivnei brak. Haman's sons, his descendants, became Jewish, converted, and they learned Torah in Bnei Brak, together with Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Tarfon. So his descendants became Jewish.
We got some of the biggest of names actually from tribes who were yet descendants of villains, like Rabbi Akiva was descended from
Nebuzaradan.
No, maybe
Nebuzaradan, Nebuchadnezzar's general.
Of Sisera.
Sisera.
And the Rabbi was descended from Emperor Nero.
Right.
You know, it's really amazing.
I think Shmai and Naphtalian were descendants from Haman. I think.
Oh, I'm Sancherib.
Sancherib.
Yeah.
So I'm saying from the worst of the worst came the greatest of the greatest.
And maybe Rabbi Akiva was also
So what is a proof that there were 70 sons of Haman who were begging from door to door? There were 70, the chsiv, because it is written, and regarding to the nevuah of Chana. Chana was the mother of Shmuel, Samuel, and she, after Hashem gave her blessed her with a son after being barren for so many years, she brought him to the Beis Hamikdash, to the Mishkan, and she sang a song to Hashem. We say this in the Haftarah in Rosh Hashanah, first day of Rosh Hashanah. And during the song of Chana, Shiras Chana, she said, Sveim balechem niskadu. Those that were full of bread now had to hire themselves out for bread. Ure'evim chadelu. Those that were hungry are no longer hungry. Adakara yalda shiva, the rabbas banim umlala. The barren one has borne 7, and the one who had many children has suffered. What it means is, on the simple meaning, is that Chana was married to Elkanah.
Mm-hmm.
Also, Penina was the second wife of Elkanah, and she had 10 children. And Chana didn't have any children. But when and Penina would always make Chana feel bad, harass her. She had in mind, L'Shem Shemayim, it says, Satan of Penina L'Shem Shemayim Niskavnu. She had in mind to make Chana pray more to Hashem, but she constantly tormented Chana, that it must be because of your deeds, you don't have children. And when Penina had children, when Chana had children, what happened was that when Chana would have one child, 2 of Penina's children would pass away. And Chana had 5 children, and Penina's youngest children were sick, so Chana davened to Hashem to save Penina's children. So the Gemara over here explains, the Medrash explains, this is actually a prophecy Chana is saying. If you remember, she was one of the 7 Nevios, woman prophetesses, that we mentioned just 2 blot ago. And Chana was saying a prophecy, what's going to be in the future about the children of Haman. Those who were once full will now go around begging for bread. And doesn't say the word, you could read the word Seveim, but if you put different nekudas, different vowels, you read it as Shivim, 70. Saying that Seveim Balechem Niskaru, those who were full now had to go around and hire themselves out for bread. Al Tikri Seveim Ela Shivim. You can read it instead of saying Seveim, that they were full, you could say Shivim. They were 70. So Haman had 70 sons who were going around begging for bread. So they didn't get much of a Yerusha from their parents, and the father did not take care of them. Rabbi Bar Abba says, you think 90 sons is a lot for one man to handle? Even, the Arab sheiks, I don't know if they have 90 children.
Well, if they have a lot of wives.
I still don't know if they have 90 children. Rabbi Bar Abba says, Kulan Masayim Ushmoinim Havu. Altogether, he had 208 sons.
And how many daughters?
I don't know. It's a good question. Shenamar, as it is written.
Did he know their names?
That's a good question.
But they have to have a special passport, ID, I am your son. No, you just want to be wealthy, you're fake.
And from where do we see that he had 208 sons? Because if you look at the words in the Megillah, Haman recounted to them the glory of his riches, and highlighting on the screen, V'roiv banav, and the multitude of his sons. It's a term that you don't see anywhere else in Tanakh. V'roiv banav. Why does it use such a terminology? Because it's trying to tell you how many sons he has. How many sons did he have? The numerical value of the word v'roiv, which is 208. Vav is 6, Reish is 200, and Beis is 2. 208 sons. So he's telling you how many sons he had. He had 208 sons. That's what Rabbi Bar Abba says. Shenemar v'roiv banav. And it says he had 2 and he had many sons. The gematria masan v'arbeisa habar. The gematria of 208. Ask the Gemara, The Roy Vigmatra Masan Var Besar. Really, the Gematra should be 214. If you write it correctly, there should be a second Vav after the first. Right.
Writing, yeah.
Meaning, if you're full writing, it should be Vav, which is 6, Reish, which is 200, Vav, which is 6, and Beis, which is 2. So if you would count the Vav inside, it should be 214. So the Gemara answers, Amar of Nachman bar Yitzchok, Nachman bar Yitzchok says, the Roiv Ksiv, when it's written in the Megillah, it's written without a Vav. All right, so this word over here is Vav Reish Beis. It's written without a Vav to tell you that he only had 208 sons. Now, we have this discussion of the Amirayim, how many sons he had. Now, when they went and killed Haman's sons later on, why didn't they kill all these sons? Why only kill the 10 sons we read about in the Megillah? Why leave some of them alive? And we're going to soon see about some of the sons of Haman. One of them is named Shimshi. He was quite a, wasn't a tzaddik of any means. He harassed, he persecuted the Jews in very substantial ways. So why not kill all of Haman's sons? And also, Haman was so rich. Why were his sons having to go around and beg for food? And again, why is Haman showing off to his wife how many sons I have? She didn't know how many sons Haman has.
Yeah, other wives probably do.
So to answer all these questions with one answer, it's the Ben Yoyada, the Ben Ish Chai, passed away in 1908, I think, in Baghdad. So the Ben Ish Chai answers them all at once. Haman is trying to show off what a successful person he is. What a great guy I am. Including that he had many illicit affairs with all the wives of all the officers and all the dignitaries in Shushan behind their husbands' backs, and nobody knows about it. He's trying to show what a great, talented person he is.
In front of my wife.
So he's telling him that just like I was successful in all my exploits I did over here, so I'm also going to be successful. I'm going to win over Mordechai. I'm going to destroy Mordechai. When all the different officers heard about this, that their sons are really not from their sons, so right away they threw them all out of the house. And they had nothing to eat. They were homeless and they had to go around begging for food. And since he had so many sons, and no one knew whose son is who. So and they weren't even sure how many sons Haman actually had. So therefore, they didn't kill all of Haman's sons because they weren't sure who's actually the son of Haman and who's not. Right? They didn't have 23andMe. Wasn't around back then. So therefore, we can understand this discussion of the Gemara. How come all these different Amirayim have different opinions? How many sons he had? Seemingly should be a well-known fact. But now you understand, because all these sons were not legitimate children. And therefore, the exact number was not known. Therefore, each one had a different understanding of how many sons Haman had. So let's continue with the Gemara.
He was a real politician.
He was a politician, yes.
How many sons do these politicians have?
We don't want to know. Continues the Gemara. Now we're coming up to the main crux of the Megillah, the main part of the Megillah, beginning of chapter 6. So a lot of things are happening that night. We're talking about the second or third, generally understood to be the second night of Pesach. A lot of things are happening all in one night. If you're going to read the Medrash, we'll have it a little bit later on the page. First of all, Esther made a feast. She invited Haman. So this is the third day of the fast of all the Jews. So Mordechai was teaching Jewish children Torah, and he said he had 22,000 children learning with him. And Haman went by, and Haman saw that Mordechai would not bow down to him, and Haman grew very, very angry, and he hatched a plot to kill Mordechai. He went ahead and he said he's going to build a gallows 50 cubits tall. According to Chassidus, many explanations why 50 cubits. 50 amas corresponds to Shara Chamishim. He wanted to reach beyond the Shtalshalos, beyond the order of the world, because the only way he could possibly win over the Jews is to 7 meters. 7 times 7 is 49. There's a sphera. Let's say it's the ultimate of creation. And 50 is called Shara Chamishim, Shara Nun of Bina. It's going beyond the limitations of the world. And he wanted to reach beyond the limitations of the world, perhaps there to kill Mordechai. In a very basic sense, I don't know if they could see it here on the screen. Why was it 50 cubits tall, 50 amas tall? So over here, if you remember, we're back in Achashverosh's palace here on the screen. Right, this is a view from the palace. You see that cone over there far away? That's the tomb of Daniel, right? That's in Shushan. And that tomb, I don't think it's 100 feet tall. I don't think it's 50 amas tall. So imagine you're here in Achashverosh's throne room, right? There's a village over there. The tomb of Daniel is in the middle of the city of Shushan, the modern day village of Shush. That's where people lived back then. So you can only see this because it's so tall, so far away, but you can see it because it's very tall. The tomb of Daniel.
Certain buildings here in Pittsburgh, even though we were seeing actually downtown, but
Correct.
so big. Yeah.
Right. Except for last week when we had all the Canadian wildfire smoke coming down here. Right. So Haman's building a gallows 50 amas tall, 100 feet tall, let's say, between 75 and 100 feet. So he wants it to be seen from Achashverosh's palace. And that's why Zeresh told him, build it 50 amas tall. Go to the king in the morning, ask the king permission to hang Mordechai on the gallows, and point to him. You see those gallows over there? That's where I want to hang Mordechai. So here's the view from Achashverosh's throne room up to the area where Haman would have made his gallows, had his gallows built. And that's why he wanted it to be so tall. It ended up being perfect because when Achashverosh, we'll get to it soon, became angry at Haman, so all the Charvoina, king's advisor, had to do was point and say, hey, look, see the gallows over there? That's what Haman prepared for Mordechai. And the king said, hang it on those gallows. So the fact that the gallows were built ended up being a perfect alibi to get the king to agree to hang Haman on the gallows. So that's why it was 50 amas tall.
So Haman was an expert in Chassidus. Figure it out.
So the Maimer that the Rebbe said, Purim 1953. Right, that's a day that it was the middle of the big doctor's plot. Maybe one day we'll go into it a little bit more when we get up to that part of the Megillah. But it's in 1953. Joseph Stalin was a dictator, sort of like Achashverosh was, super paranoid. The only difference between him and Achashverosh was Achashverosh ruled the entire world. He only ruled the Soviet Union. And Achashverosh was a king for 15 years, and he was a king, and he unfortunately ruled for about 30 years. Right. So he did mass genocide, right? He killed over 40 million people, whether through famine, whether through deportations. In Crimea, he had a huge population of Tartars. And in one night, he literally rounded up about 1 million, I think 500,000 people, sent them all off to Siberia. I know I spoke to people, they're still around. They grew up in Crimea, some of the cities, and used to play with their neighbors, their Taran neighbors. And one night, they're all gone. All right, and this is incredible. He did it to multiple ethnicities, And it came time for the turn of the Jews. Because after World War II, it was a great patriotic war. And of course, he blundered and made many mistakes by controlling first of all, before the war, he killed 2/3 of all the generals and officers in the Red Army.
And he was aiding actually Germany in the beginning.
He aided Germany. He asked the Germans to fabricate evidence against the Russian generals, and they said, "Sure, no problem. We're going to invade you in 2 years.
Yeah.
We'll help you with whatever you want."
Stalin had said, "Oh, Hitler would not be stupid enough, to invade Russia at the same time."
Sure,
it's a risk, but he did.
and if and his official history books, and then you could read the accounts of many of the Jewish soldiers, and you see just literally how insanely foolish the Red Army was, right? Accounts from many of these Jewish soldiers. It's just insanely stupid and foolish things that they did. There's no reason for them to lose even a third or a quarter of the amount of soldiers and civilians that they lost. But that's the way it works when you're in a country like that. But then after the war, everyone's, expecting that finally we won our enemies. And now we're going to have a good life. Everyone's going to have their own car. Everyone's going to have plenty of food. And it didn't turn out that way. So now he had to find a new scapegoat. And it came up in the form of the Jews. And he started a whole campaign to get rid of the Jews. And he started off with Shlomo Michaels, was a Jewish writer. He was the head of the Yiddish theater in Moscow. Him and there was somebody else. And this Shlomo Michaels was actually a very loyal communist. During the war, he was sent off to America by the Soviet Union, and he raised millions of dollars to go to the Soviet war effort. There's pictures of him. He made concerts in Chicago and New York and all different cities. And he raised a lot of money to go to the Russian war effort, whoever's pockets it went into. But of course, he wasn't loyal enough. And so first he had him executed and killed, right? And then a whole bunch of Jewish doctors disappeared. And a big, in all the newspapers, it came out that there was a conspiracy to kill Stalin, to destabilize the country, all by the Jewish doctors. Spearheaded and masterminded by the Joint Distribution Committee. It was a whole thing. And of course, the only way news got around in Russia was through rumors. And unfortunately, rumors had a way of getting around, saying how there was he had a plan to all the Jews, Pesach time, to deport them all from entire Russia to an area called Bijan, which is near the Sea of Japan, very remote. Till today, it's one of the lowest densities of population in the world. It's wilderness there. Send millions of Jews. I think he had 3 or 4 million Jews planned to send all over there within a very short time. And not just there was a plot, he already had the cattle cars lined up in different train stations all over Russia. And wherever Jews went, saying everyone, like their workers or coworkers or neighbors, would all tell them, "We're going to take your house in a few days after you're gone." It was a very big fright, a very big scare that went on then. And that's what was happening at the time of the Rebbe's Purim Farbrengen. What?
So what happened? Did they end up getting deported?
Oh, what happens is the Rebbe killed Stalin. Purim 1953, right? When very unique. I think it's the first time the Rebbe said 2 Mamarim and 1 Farbrengen. But the second Maimer, the Rebbe spoke about this idea, why Haman built before the Maimer, the Rebbe became very, very serious, and the Rebbe spoke a story about the Rebbe Rashab, saying that during the times after the Tsar was overthrown, were elections in Russia before the communists took over, and the Rebbe Rashab said that everybody, all Chassidim should go and vote. So there's a certain Chassid who knew nothing of anything that's going on in the world, and nothing about politics, nothing about anything. And the Rebbe said to go vote. He has to go vote. He has no idea what to do. So in the morning he went to the mikveh because he's fulfilling a mission of the Rebbe, and he asked Chassidim to show him the place where to vote. He goes to the voting place. He puts on his gartel, and he thinks of Maimer Chassidus deeply. And then he asks other Chassidim, "Show me what to do." And they showed him what you do, how you vote, what you write in, and he did it. And after he leaves the voting, he walks out. And in Russia, one of the big cheers is called "Hoorah" till today. you see videos of Putin in front of his troops today, in front of soldiers, he'll get up and I say, hoorah! And then you'll have all the thousands of soldiers screaming back, hoorah, hoorah! So the Rebbe said, so this chassid walks out and he sees a whole bunch of people outside the voting place and they're all screaming, hoorah, 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 which means hooray, means hoorah in Hebrew means he is bad. And the Rebbe became so serious and screamed out loud 3 times, hoorah, hoorah, hoorah. Chassidim didn't first of all, the Rebbe never said a mimer a second time. And, so the whole entire Fabring of the Rebbe screamed out 3 times, hoorah, hoorah, hoorah. And then after, what? And then right afterwards, the Rebbe said the mimer, which in this mimer, he spoke about what was Haman thinking. How did he think he's going to try destroying the Jews if Hashem is always watching out for the Jews? That's why Haman made a goyrel, a lottery, because a goyrel reaches Lamaila, higher than the places where you can't do anything to affect the outcome of a lottery. So therefore, the Yidden can never do. He thought that Yidden, even if they do tshuva, they won't be able to effect his decree. And over there, he'll be able to be successful in destroying the Jews. And that's why he made a tree 50 amos high in order to go reach above limitations, above the idea of the 49 day, which is the completion of creation, ultimate of creation, and to reach beyond that.
It was Stalin actually. He knew actually that eventually Russia and Germany would go to war, but he thought that Hitler went to actually fight them both for us. Meanwhile, they had a treaty to divide actually Eastern Europe. So he was going to be having the Germans do their stuff, and then afterwards they were going to fight. And then all of a sudden, Hitler betrayed Stalin. So now Stalin became the big hero against Germany. The guy helped to make Hitler rise to power.
Correct. And so there, and afterwards, but the Rebbe said that the Rebbe explains in the Maimer, it's because the mistake of Haman is that true from the level of Goyro, this high level, there's no difference between one person and another person. But even be higher than that is a Hashem chose Yidden, what's called Bechira Chavshus, free choice. Free choice is only when you have 2 things that are of equal value. If one thing is better than the other, if you had a choice to choose, a 1985, Pontiac, or a 2024 Tesla, I don't know, but you would choose whatever. Obviously, it's not a hard choice to make. You choose a better one. But if you have 2 things that are of equal, 2 exact cars that are exactly the same, which one do I choose? I'm only choosing for my own free choice. So in a similar way, the reason why Hashem chose him is because Jews reach a level of Bechira much deeper. And so this is a Maimer the Rebbe said. And what happens is that Stalin died right after. Stalin died that Purim, that day. How he died, we still don't know. Whether he was killed, whether he had a heart attack. Died on Purim that year. While the Rebbe sang the Maimer. Now, in the year 1990, 90 or 91, I think it was 1990, the Rebbe said they should take this Maimer that the Rebbe said in 1953 and to rewrite it. They wrote an introduction that this Maimer was said by the Rebbe in the year 1953. And it seems like it was connected to the events that were going on then in Russia. And the Rebbe approved that to be printed. I mean, the Rebbe said how there is a direct connection to that. And why did the Rebbe choose for the Maimer to be printed again right then? We don't know. Perhaps because right then there was I think about that time there was a coup in Russia, something like that, And the Rebbe said this is to reprint the Maimer, that to bring down the cost of the world, to make sure that everything should turn out in the proper way, in the best way. So you asked the question: did Haman know really what all of his thing is? Haman, the way in a physical body, I don't know, but meaning the mazel of Haman definitely sees it, right? The mazel of Haman above, then you say the soul of Haman, or the guardian angel of Haman definitely sees it, and that's what he's doing. It says about Paroi, he's Periu Kol Nahirin. Moshe is approaching Parai, and why is he scared of Parai? Because Parai comes from a very powerful level of godliness. And therefore Parai was not afraid of Moshe Rabbeinu. Was Parai aware that he had this power? Not sure if in a physical sense. People are aware. When the Rebbe lived in Paris, and the Rebbe moved from one apartment to another, this might have been Berlin, and the Rebbe's father writes to him about how you moved to apartment, and you told me the layout of the apartment is you have one room in the middle, a small room in the middle, and one room coming off to the right, and one room coming off to the left. And the Rebbe's father explained to him, according to Kabbalah, why the house is designed in this way, why the Rebbe whose name is this and the Rebbe whose name is this moved into that house, and why they moved into the house specifically on this date, all according to Kabbalah, right? And it's very interesting to see, and there are multiple things like that where the Rebbe's father explains to the Rebbe things that are going on according to Kabbalah. So this that went on according to Kabbalah, the builders of the house, when they built it, they had in mind that it should be specifically these things of Kabbalah. I doubt it, but their mazel definitely saw it, and therefore you act in a way down here according to that.
Apparently, a lot of demagogue leaders had a negative spiritual side. Napoleon also was supposed to.
Napoleon was more of an actual sorcerer, saying because he wanted some of the Alter Rebbe's belongings brought to him.
Do we know whether the Chassidim joined the Rebbe in saying "Hoorah"? That's
when
in 53.
That's what I always heard, that they all, everyone at the Fabrengen screamed out "Hoorah" 3 times. There's a story. There's a video of Rabbi Khan saying this. I guess we have 10 minutes left, so maybe we'll just go down this path.
It was Purim when the Rebbe said it, or
Purim, 1953.
And that very day,
Stalin died. So I mean, they only gave out the report a week later, and then the whole doctor's plot fell apart. Rabbi Yitzchok Golden, I think was his name. He was in Siberia, one of the gulags then. And all the fellow prisoners are telling him about the doctor's plot, and they're taking prisoners from the gulags and sending them there too. Your days are numbered. And he told them, it was on Purim, he went to his own room, he read the Megillah to himself, he was all by heart, he was very sad, melancholy. And then a bunch of non-Jewish prisoners came in and started taunting him, making fun of him. So then he stood up and he said, Mordechai, I just read in the Megillah, he didn't even move, wasn't affected by Haman, I should be affected. They started telling him, look, Stalin is the most powerful person in the world, and he could do anything he wants. He's done to many nations, he's already done, things to them. He's going to do it to you too. And so he told them, the Jewish people are not going anywhere, Hashem is taking care of them. Stalin, we don't even know what's going to be an hour from now with him. And he didn't know why he said that. And a few days later, one of the prisoners came over to him, like top secret. It's like, did you have any inside information? He said, no. So he didn't hear Stalin died? He said, no, Baruch Hashem.
Hail, the mobsters dead.
Yeah, they didn't tell the prisoners till much later because they didn't want any revolt from the prisoners. Although what ended up happening is that they pardoned all the criminal prisoners. All the criminals, the murderers and the thieves, they pardoned them all after Stalin died. So then, at the Rebbe changes the world with a mimer, we've seen multiple times. The mimer, the Shabbos before Kennedy died, was I think it was on Shabbos actually that day. I think it was a Saturday. No, he was killed. I don't remember. Also, the mimer that day, the Rebbe spoke about a certain idea about how when the king dies. That many times, every Erev Rosh Hashanah, the Rabbi bringing many times Erev Rosh Hashanah, the Rebbe, starting from the year. No, I think there always was. It was bringing on Erev Rosh Hashanah by the Rebbe, and the night before Rosh Hashanah, and whenever the Rebbe would say by the Fabrengen about how the Tzemach Tzedek would sit in Lubavitch and make Zdarim in Pittsburgh. So during the Suda, on the first night, the first day of Rosh Hashanah, the Rebbes generally will not speak at all. The second night of Rosh Hashanah, Tzemach Tzedek by the Suda in his home, by the meal on Rosh Hashanah, he would speak about what's going on in Petersburg, in Petersburg, in the capital. And he would say, I think it's good that this minister should be put in position. I think it's good that this minister should lose his power. Whatever the Tzemach Tzedek would talk about, that's what happened that year.
Mhm.
And there's a saying that Tzemach Tzedek exists in Lubavitch and Ramach's Darim in Petersburg. Tzemach Tzedek sits in Lubavitch and he arranges what's happening in the Petersburg, in the capital. And whenever the Rebbe would say that, by the Fabring and Erev Rosh Hashanah, it was always known some big world leader who's an anti-Semite is going to die that year.
Mhm.
And there, in Mem Gimel, Mem Dalet, 83, 84 was 2 years in a row that the Rebbe did it. 1 year it was in the 70s. Also, it happened. There was a premier of France. It was very anti-Semitic, very anti-Israel, and he died that year. There was his name Andropov? I don't remember his name. One of the Soviet premiers.
Andropov,
He
yeah.
was there for only a year, and then he died.
Yeah.
Right. And there are multiple people. I read once a whole list of them, right?
Mhm.
But whenever the Rebbe would say that by the Fabrengen, everyone was looking forward what's going to be happening that year, who's going to die this year. So that again, the Shabbos before Kennedy died, the Rebbe spoke about it in the Maimer. When Rebbe says about Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, he changed the world by saying Torah. When the world needed rain, so they came over to Rav Shimon Bar Yochai and they asked him to daven for rain. Instead of davening, he said Torah on the pasuk Kini ma tov manoim shevasachim gam yachad. How great is it when friends sit together, and the rain came down. So someone on the levels of tzaddikim like the Rebbe, the Rashbi, so they could change the world through their Torah. So the Rebbe wants to bring a change to the world. It happens through a maimer of Chassidus, and that's how the Rebbeim would do it. So the Rebbe definitely sees the source, and the Rebbe could explain what they were thinking, what he was thinking, what Paro was thinking, what Haman was thinking, what Achashverosh was thinking. Rabbi Levi, the Rebbe's father, was a Shabbos before he passed away. One of the weeks before he passed away, he said something explaining the idea of Hitler and Stalin, two of them, according to Kabbalah, right? And he spoke very sharp words against them, and people were shocked that he could speak like that in Russia against Stalin. But I guess at that point he didn't have much to fear because he passed away only several weeks later.
By Kennedy, you mean Kennedy's the elder, the one who was an anti-Semite?
No, 1953. John F. Kennedy. The Rebbe was already Rebbe. 63, you're right, 63. There's many things, and that's in a global scale, and also in a small scale. There's also many things that the Rebbe said a mimer saying that I said it for you because you know what happened then. This person went through an accident. The Rebbe said I had to have you in mind, and that's why I said these words in different things. So it's many examples of this. But all right, let's we have 5 minutes left. So we'll just have a explanation of the Rebbe. I'll bring on the next words. That night, the king's sleep was disturbed. The king could not sleep. Why couldn't he sleep that night? So if you look at the Medrash, and he says that there were so many Jewish children gathered, and they were all crying out. And it says that Haman walked back out to Mordechai. He told Mordechai, your hours are numbered. I got you now. I made a gallows for you. You can see it over there. And I'm going to go to the king and get permission to kill you. And Mordechai was teaching all the children. And when he saw Haman approaching with his henchmen, he told the children, run away, go back to your parents. You should stay safe. And they told Mordechai, Loi nazveka, we're not leaving you. We're not abandoning you. We are together with you. Whatever happens to you is going to happen to us. And Haman saw this. He was so infuriated that he ordered his men to put these 22,000 Jewish boys in chains. And he says, when we kill Mordechai, we're going to kill all of them as well. right? So that night, the mothers came or telling the children, please run away. And they told the mothers, we are not running away from Mordechai. We are staying with Mordechai. So Mordechai inspired Mesiras Nefesh by these children as well. Who's teaching them Torah, the laws of Kmitza. We'll get to that soon in the Gemara. So the cry of 22,000 children is a very loud cry. In the physical sense, it's very hard to sleep. But this, it says, Shnas HaMelech. It doesn't say the sleep of Achashverosh was disturbed. It says, Shnas HaMelech, the sleep of the king, which the Gemara will say is Shnas Malka Shel Olam, the slumber of the king of the universe, of Hashem. What does it mean Hashem slumbers? It says, V'ina liyanim v'lishin shomer Yisrael. The guardian of Israel neither sleeps nor slumbers. So what does it mean the slumber of Hashem was disturbed? That means Hashem obviously doesn't sleep. It's not a human condition. The idea of sleep is when a person's powers, koiches, are not revealed. Person, whatever he has ability to draw, person has the ability to write, to sing, you can't do any of that while they're sleeping. So in a similar sense, it says Hashem was sleeping. Why was Hashem sleeping? Because Hashem mirrors the Jewish people. It says, Ura lama sishan Hashem. You say in Tehillim, awake. Why are you slumbering, O God, O Hashem? Hashem could slumber? God forbid. But it means that when the Jewish people are not acting in a proper manner, in the way they should, so then Hashem, so to speak, could be in the same way and act back in a way that seems that Hashem is not listening. It looks to us that Hashem is not responding. So during the times of Achashverosh, Jewish people were in a state of what could be called spiritual sleep. A person's mind still works when they sleep, but you don't see it in the way they act. So when it came to Torah mitzvahs, a person could have a Jewish heart, be awake inside. But when a Jew is awake entirely, you can recognize it when he walks, when he goes, when he moves. This is a Jewish person. Even when he's doing something totally mundane, you can tell he's Jewish. Eats like a Jew, walks like a Jew, honest like a Jew, follows the ways of a Torah like a Jew. When the Jewish people are in a state of what could be called spiritual sleep from Torah and mitzvahs, then it's not necessarily recognizable the uniqueness of what makes a Jew unique. And that's called the state of sleep by a Jew. Well, Haman, if you remember what he said, Achashverosh, let's go to the previous chapter. It says, Yeshnoi am echad, right before this, chapter 3 over here. When Haman came to the king and he told them, Yeshnoi am echad, there is one nation which is unique and scattered among the people, we should destroy them. The word Yeshnoi, again, the Megillah doesn't have vowels. You can read it as Yashnu. They are sleeping. And if we learned in the Gemara, it says the Jewish people have been sleeping from the mitzvahs. They're not, don't worry about the Jews trying to daven to Hashem or rely on their merits, because they're sleeping from the mitzvahs. So the angel of Haman was saying in the heavenly court that these people are separated, are supposed to be Amecha, they're supposed to be one nation, unique and separated from the people of the nations of the world. But now I can't recognize them. I see a Persian who's from the Chaldean ancestry, and I see a Persian from Jewish ancestry, and he can't tell anything unique about the Jewish. So if the Jewish people are sleeping, Hashem should also be in the same situation. And that's what it was. The state of the Jewish people caused a state of sleep, so to speak, kaviyachol, by heaven, God forbid. And therefore, there was a place for Haman's decree. And this was a great miracle, that Nadadash Shnas HaMelech, Hashem's sleep was shaken. Although from the state and the actions of the way the Jewish people were acting until that point could have been, God forbid, that way, that the Jews were deserving of the decree. But the big miracle happened, caused that the Hashem's sleep, so to speak, should become shaken out, should cause that to awaken the Jews. You say Hashem Shemrecha, Hashem guards you, Hashem Tzilcha, Hashem is your shadow. The Magen Mizrich says, what does it mean? The Hashem Tzilcha, Hashem is your shadow, just like a shadow, right? You move it moves together with you. Hashem is our shadow. Hashem Tzilcha, Hashem is your shadow. When you move, Hashem moves commensurate with you. Magen Mizrich says, Dam alamayla mimach, know what is above you. But it says in Pirkei Avos, Ma shalamayla mimach, whatever happens above happens because of you. The attitude of the person is what causes things to happen. That's why simcha, happiness, is so important. Because if you're besimcha, if you're happy, it causes happiness above. The last Ma'ariv of the Alter Rebbe's life, Matzah Shabbos, Chav Daled Tevis, Alter Rebbe was davening in the town of Piena at great length, and the Piena was a town, right? And after davening, his son, the Mittler Rebbe, was waiting for him, or not Mittler, was Semach Tzedek, his grandson, was waiting for him to finish, and he told him that it's very important. You should always have to be besimcha, because that's what causes Hashem to be besimcha as well. Causes from above. So that's the idea of Nadada Shnasa Melech, and that's why you're supposed to raise your voice from this part of Megillah and onwards. When you say B'layla hu Nadada Shnasa Melech, at that night the king's sleep was awakened. You're supposed to raise your voice from there till the end of the Megillah, and it's also a good thing to do because at this point now you're at the halfway point of the Megillah, and people are starting to snooze a little bit. So then you have to raise your voice to get everyone's attention. But people lower their voices, usually the ones who read the Megillah, a few psukim before this. And then from here on, they read with a louder tone of voice. But this is the main miracle of Purim, that even when we're not deserving, Hashem still helps and saves the Jews. Thank you for joining today.
Thank you, Rabbi. Yitzchok.